The little boy is Devontae Hart. The police officer is Brett Barnum. This picture was taken by a freelance photographer, a college student named Johnny Wynn. Within hours of its publication by the Portland Oregonian, this image was shared more than 150,000 times on Facebook. The effect was powerful for a lot of us because at right about the same time, we were seeing other images about encounters between the police and citizens that weren't quite so heartwarming. They were devastating. A variety of dread, anxiety, and resentment has been building for a while now. Civic Rage is trending, not just in the US, but around the world. Consider several current global trends. Increasing political unrest. Arab Spring, Occupy, just two examples. We've seen countless demonstrations with a full spectrum of demands and confrontational tactics. Democratic governments that are increasingly confrontational with interest groups and highly partisan factions. Aggressive and militarized police that are themselves becoming the focus of conflict with citizen activists. And when these militarized police show up, they bring state-of-the-art crowd dispersal technology, like skunk spray shot out of water cannons, long-range acoustic devices that deliver crushing decibels of noise, microwave technology that interacts with the molecules in your body to heat you up from the inside. There's more, but it's all designed to either drive people from the scene or make them more easy to arrest. It's not a hug. And it's being sold to governments to use on their own citizens. So with emotions running so high, it's hard to avoid being in some kind of camp, right? But what if you were trained in democratic theory, spent most of your career trying to spark civic engagement, and then find yourself teaching criminal justice classes to college students who want to be cops? What camp would you be in? What would that guy have to say? Well, that would be me. I really am one of those people with skin in the game on both sides of the barricade. For one thing, I don't need a Ph.D. in political theory to know that in this country, gathering in crowds, it's protected political speech. But the other side is that every day when I go to work, I look into the faces of students who will need to wear a bulletproof vest when they go to work. If somebody's breaking into your house, you won't call a demonstrator. You'll call the cops. And all the ones I know will come as fast as they can. For you. It's what they signed up for. It's who they are. You've seen a lot of pictures of cops lately. This is what they look like to me every day. So we have two groups of citizens showing up, putting themselves in difficult situations, challenging situations, sometimes life-threatening, in order to confront problems in society. I'm in both camps. Social and political life at its most basic and its most aspirational needs the police and demonstrators. But the way things work has them lined up against each other. And that's troubling to me. So I want to find some way to think about this that honors them both. Because I love demonstrators and I love cops. But that's where it gets sticky. Democratic governments use the police for law and order at the same time that they protect the rights and freedoms of the citizens. Non-democratic regimes, they just want to stay in power without any real accountability. But using the police for political stability, that invites abuse and repression, which leads to dissent and resistance, which inevitably leads to greater surveillance and even more repression. I think you see where this is going. It's the kind of stuff I think about all the time. Not long ago, I was watching television and I saw this infomercial. You've seen the kind, where there's a salesman who is trying to sell you some great insights into how to change your life. Well, this one was called 5 Steps to Becoming a Millionaire. Step 1, I'm not kidding. Step 1 was watch what poor people do and don't do it. Right. It's offensive, simplistic, but there is something to be said for trying to avoid the mistakes of others, especially when the evidence is easy enough to see. So it got me thinking, what's the infomercial message for the problems that we can expect to keep having between citizens and government? Problems that will send citizens into the streets, where we will then expect the police to show up and deal with the demonstrators. Is there a simple but offensive 5-step plan? I can do that. And in my 5-step plan, there's something for everybody. So step 1, to governments. If you don't want Arab Spring to happen on your watch, then watch what Arab dictators do and don't do it. Yeah, don't ignore inequalities of wealth and political voice. Don't take away fundamental citizen rights, like collective bargaining or appropriate taxation, or even the ballot box. This tends to upset the citizens, and then they go into the streets where you have to deal with them. Step 2, to citizens. If you don't want to be constantly enraged at government, then stop electing people who hate government to run government. When you elect people who hate government, you don't get better government. You don't even get smaller government. You just get bad government. Liberal, conservative, vote for whoever you want, but they should want to make government work. Step number 3, for demonstrators, aim at the problem, not at the police. Your problems are not generally caused by the police. Government sent the police there because government thinks you are the problem and they want the police to handle it. And when abusive or violent cops are the problem, well, maybe their misconduct is a symptom of their own anxiety and resentment, some larger tragic reality that the cops are just as desperately caught up in as you are. And good cops want bad cops to be held accountable. Step 4, for the police. Any demonstration short of a riot is legitimate, protected political speech, not a zombie apocalypse. Demonstrators, they're your fellow citizens, and they're trying to speak to power. You are there to avoid a tragedy. The tragedy of a citizen getting maimed or killed if things get out of control. Yeah, sure. But also the tragedy, perhaps irreversible, of democracy dying and something darker being born. Step 5, to the 1%. If you want to keep your position in the structure, don't set the building on fire. Seriously, fat cats. Wouldn't it be the ultimate irony if you somehow used your wealth and your power to push the system too far, and then the whole thing just blew up in your face like an exploding cigar? Actually, I think I read that argument somewhere in grad school. It was on the test. Can't quite remember the guy's name at this point. Oh, well. Oh, okay, there he is. Anyway, wouldn't that be ironic? Okay, so as I promised you, I've been simplistic and I've been offensive. It was fun. And probably right about now you're wondering who I am and what I'm up to with this talk. Well, I'm not a revolutionary. All my serious leftist friends won't have me. All my friends who are conservative have even more serious doubts about me. But when I worry about the problems that we're having between demonstrators and the police in the world today and where it all might lead, I don't worry that we won't be able to radically change things towards some progressive outcome. I'm actually afraid that we won't be able to save the best that we have. When the picture of the little boy hugging the police officer got so much attention, it came out that the police officer in the picture, the one who asked for the hug, also was supportive of Darren Wilson, the officer who shot Michael Brown in Ferguson. A lot of people thought he was a hypocrite, but I didn't. Because a good cop can comfort a child and also care about the tragedy of an officer-involved shooting where some man loses his life. Good citizens can be liberal or conservative, and they can have liberal and conservative feelings. And who can't use a hug when things get bad? It makes sense to me. One of the courses I teach, it's called Civil Liability. It's about all the ways that a police officer can get into trouble for abusing the authority of the badge or for just screwing up, making the wrong choice at a critical moment. Maybe they won't be criminally prosecuted, but they could get fired or sued. There's civil liability through state liability. There's federal liability for that. There's also, we learn in the course about duty and breach and proximate cause. It's complicated, but they need to know this stuff. So that's why we teach it. But the most important part of the course, the real takeaway, is pretty simple. The most important thing to understand is that the goal isn't to avoid getting fired or sued or even indicted. The goal is to avoid the tragedy that you'll never get over, even if you don't get fired or sued or indicted. The justice system will have all the time in the world to figure that out after the fact. But the cop will only have an instant to judge the danger. This is a critical moment for democracy in the US and around the world. Democracies, if we can't figure out even the relationship between police and demonstrators, who do you trust to figure that out? Dictators? Governments that only seem to answer to billionaires? If we can't even get free speech right, how do you like our chances with all the other problems? In this critical moment, like police officers dispatched to a dangerous scene, we all have to make choices. Here's a choice. We can invest in technology to break up crowds, or we can invest in something that speaks to whatever is causing the crowds to gather. In a democracy, we all have a duty to show up where there is anger, resentment, conflict, fear, and restore the situation to something that is less like what's bothering us and more like what we want. So before we go much further in this global moment, before we get ourselves too encamped on either side of the barricades, we better figure out what we want from democratic life. So let's keep it simple. What's the tragedy we want to avoid? Thank you.